Hello, and welcome to Stats with Chaz. I'm Dr. Charlie Collins. Today I will discuss central tendency in statistics. We will cover when to use which measure of central tendency, how to calculate different measures of central tendency, and how to interpret each of these measures of central tendency. First, what is central tendency? Central tendency is used to summarize a distribution of scores to give us a middle or central score among that distribution. There are three measures of central tendency: the mode, the median, and the mean. The mode tells us what the most commonly occurring score is. The median tells us what the score right in the middle of all scores is, and the mean gives us the average on the distribution of scores. Each of these gives us a different piece of information about the distribution of scores. Now, when should each of these measures be used? Meaning, what level of measurement, nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio, is the most appropriate for each measure of central tendency? The general rule of thumb is that nominal data should only use mode, ordinal can use mode and median, and interval ratio can use all three, mode, median, and mean. Note that this is a general rule of thumb. There are some small exceptions to the rule. One exception is that a mean can be used for ordinal data sometimes when the ordinal variable is on a Likert type scale. Likert scales are those that ask questions starting with on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 meaning not at all and 10 meaning completely, how much do you agree with the following statement? That scale there, a 1 to 10, is a Likert type scale. This is ordinal because the 1 to 10 scale is somewhat arbitrary. The 0 is meaningless, or it's just a figure representation. Another exception is when data are skewed on an interval ratio type variable. Skewness means that the distribution has several very high or very low scores or outliers. Income is usually a skewed variable because most people fall between $10,000 and $100,000 a year, with only a few people like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates, making a lot more than that, in the billions of dollars. Let's move on to calculating each of these measures independently. Keep in mind when to use each. I will demonstrate finding the mode with a nominal variable, but we'll use an interval ratio variable for both median and mean. First, let's find the mode. Remember, the mode is the value that occurs most frequently in a distribution of scores. Let's say I'm interested in knowing which social media platform my students use the most. So I ask the question to my students, which social media platform do you use the most? Remember, for nominal variables, the response options need to be exhaustive and mutually exclusive. So for me, my options include Facebook, which equals 1, Instagram equals 2, Cake equals 3, Twitter equals 4, Tumblr equals 5, Snapchat equals 6, and other equals 7. Remember, these numbers are completely arbitrary. The numbers are representative of that particular category. I asked 12 students this question and get these raw responses here. So as you can see, student 1 responded with a 4, which equals Twitter. Student 2 responded with a 5, which equals Tumblr, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count these responses and put them in the frequency table. The frequency is the number of responses for each category. So what we should have here is the frequency should add up to 12 since our sample size is 12. So if we have 5 plus 1 plus 1 is 7, plus 3 is 10, 11, 12. That equals 12, so we know that we added everything up correctly. Now to find the mode. Again, we're looking for the most frequently occurring response, which makes the frequency table helpful because we can just look at our frequency values here. So what we find is that Facebook is the most frequent with 5 users, right? So 5 people use Facebook the most compared to the rest of them. What this translates to is that my students tend to use Facebook the most frequently out of all the other social media platforms. Now let's move on to the median. The median is the exact center of the distribution of scores. If the distribution has an odd number of cases, let's say 7, the median is the score right in the middle, the 4th case. If the distribution has an even number of cases, like our distribution here, let's say 8, the median is the average of the two middle scores, the fourth and fifth cases. For this example, let's say I'm interested in the ages of my students in a small class of 8 students, and I get this distribution here. So 1919, 2020, 21, 22, 23, and 35. Since I have an even number of cases, I need to find the average of the two middle scores to find the median. And I want you to note too that these are in order of age, right? So it goes from youngest to the oldest. So we have to arrange our cases in that, our scores in that situation to find the median, to find the two middle numbers. So here, the two middle cases are cases 4 and cases 5. So what I need to do is I need to calculate the average of these two. So the average is 20 plus 21 divided by 2, which gives us a score of 20.5. So in this case, how I would interpret this is the median age of this particular class of 8 students is 20.5. Finally, let's move on to calculating the mean. Remember, the mean is the average of a distribution of scores. When I say distribution, I mean the scores, the range of scores. The formula for the mean is the sum of all scores divided by the number of cases. In this case, sigma, or what looks like a large letter E, represents to sum. It means to sum. The X here represents the scores, right? And the N represents the sample size. So what we can do here is we can plug in our scores and come up with our mean. So what I did here is I summed up all of these scores. So I added them all together, the 219s, the 220s, 21, 22, 23, and 35. Added all those together, we get 179. Divide that by our sample size, our number of cases, or our N, and what we get is 22.3, it's actually 375. And so how I would interpret this is that the average age of my students in this particular class is 22.375 years old. By now you should know when to use which measure of central tendency, how to calculate different measures of central tendency, and how to interpret each measure of central tendency. Thanks for watching Stats with Chaz. I'm Dr. Charlie Collins.